19 years of unbroken democratic governance is, as all the guests indicated, worthy of celebration. All you need to do was to play back the tape and then imagine what went on before the advent of the Fourth Republic. All right, let's take the front pages are pretty different this morning in terms of the accent on the lead stories, but regardless, there are stories that are come on to some of them. Let's begin by taking a look at the lead story of the Leadership newspaper, and this is a judicial decision. It says with a kicker, 481 billion naira budget padding. Court orders prosecution of indicted National Assembly members. It says reports of investigation must be made available to the president. That story is on page 5. Also there on the front page, it says police uncover illegal gun factory in Benue. And Saraki's meeting with health workers ends in stalemate. Ex-PDP spokesman Adeyeye defects to APC. Cholera outbreak. WHO deploys 39 staff to Adamawa. And federal government committed to completing abandoned projects. Lai Mohammed, that's on page 8.
The New Telegraph has its main headline here, sit-at-home order. Police governors move against IPOB. It has a number of riders. CP vows to use legitimate force to stop Biafran agitators. Traders who observe order to forfeit shops, says the government. IPOB, we're only honoring fallen soldiers. Absentee civil servants to face sanction. The picture story on the front of the New Telegraph is the Democracy Day for the Physically Challenged. We are all in this project together, and all of us should celebrate together. There are a number of small headlines under the nameplate of the New Telegraph. FARC fumes, that's the Federation's Allocations Account Committee. Fumes over NNPC's deductions for JVCC obligations. Over 20 die in Ondo auto crash, that's the sad one. Nigeria has fared well despite challenges, so says Kalu, or Juzo Kalu. And then 481 billion naira budget padding. Court orders prosecution of indicted lawmakers.
All right, Bayo, very quickly, so that you take this along, let's look at the front page of the Authority newspaper. Authority newspaper, of course, above the nameplate, you also have the stories on IPOB and others. But the lead story for the Authority comes with a kicker. New minimum wage. Federal government dashes workers' hope. Says payment can't begin this year. And states propose 22,000 naira and new revenue formula. Says payment can't begin this year for new minimum wage. It hasn't been agreed on yet, and states are proposing 22,000 naira. Now, below the photograph on the front page, there says third anniversary. We've made progress, and that's according to President Buhari. Details on page 3. I've delivered on my campaign promises, says Wike. Democracy Day. Jonathan celebrates Nigerian youth, or just peace. Page 2. Bye.
Well, let's start with the story that broke from the Federal Lagos High Court has ordered that principal office of the National Assembly that allegedly appropriated a sum of about 481 billion in the name of budget padding should be prosecuted. The Justice Mohammed Idris ordered President Muhammadu Buhari to instruct the anti-graft agencies that investigated to submit a report to him, and also the court also ordered the president to direct the Attorney General of the Federation to follow up with anti-corruption agencies on the matters as indicated. This case was brought up by the Socio-Economic Right Accountability Project. It was filed by an order of Monday, was using the court to compel them to act in that. There were also two interesting orders. One was to halt a sum of about 131 billion also appropriated in this year's budget. The other is a theft of about 40 billion that is alleged to be in the budget for what was described as non-constituency project. Now, Democracy Day was...
Bayo, sorry, just to share, just before you leave that, because I know that you're going to speak extensively on Democracy Day, the decision that you just talked about, with the greatest respect to his lordship, there would appear to be some misdirection in ordering the president to direct the Attorney General of the Federation to proceed against those persons. It is the constitutional responsibility of the Attorney General to institute, continue, discontinue proceedings against any person because the chief law officer of the state. Yeah. And in doing so, the Attorney General of the Federation or of a state is required not to be under the direction of anybody, including the president or the governor of a state. And that's how you enforce the law. Well, you're not saying you are ordering the president to direct the attorney general. So the president can also direct the attorney general to discontinue a case.
Well, since it is the function of the Attorney General of Federation, based on the case that was filed by the Seraph, the court in its wisdom is advising the president to act accordingly by asking the Attorney General to act according to his constitutional responsibility. Be that as it may, Democracy Day was the hallmark of celebration. President Muhammadu Buhari in the broadcast said that his administration has delivered on his campaign promises. And specifically, he said, despite numerous challenges, all these commitments on economy, corruption, and also security have been delivered. He said, there, however, are challenges, and he says that by expressing serious regret over killings by headsmen and baddies, he vowed that perpetrators and sponsors will be brought to book. He said 3 tiers of government, that is the federal, the state, and the local government, are presently engaging communities, religious organizations to restore peaceful coexistence. And he made some declaration. Democracy is a celebration of freedom, and therefore it's a salute to the resilience and determinations of Nigerians, and also a recommitment to lead Nigeria into a new era of justice and prosperity. There were flags also from the states. In Akwa Ibom State, Governor Udom Emmanuel called on politicians and cautioned them against disunity in the state. Well, Governor Rochas Okorocha in Imo State lamented about democracy. He says, while those or other claims base their democracy on established moral values, regrettably, in our own climate here, it is based on tribalism, geographical and religious background. He said Boko Haram and herdsmen torment, as bad as it is often seen in ethnic context. In Rivers State, Governor Yeso Wike says that he runs an open, transparent, and accountable government. However, he urged all the people to be mindful of politicians plotting to plunder the revenue.
All the states actually celebrated Democracy Day, so they would have so many issues being thrown up. We'll quickly go to our editorial now, which will be taken from Daily Independent, and it's about the agreement between Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates on stolen assets. And it says, Nigeria, UAE agreement on stolen assets. Nigeria's unrelenting war on corruption and repatriation of stolen funds stashed abroad got a boost on May 13, 2018 in Abu Dhabi with the exchange of instruments of ratification on judicial agreements signed between Nigeria and the UAE in 2016.
Yes, the process that was started in 2016 was concluded in 2018, and now there is a solid agreement that has been ratified. But still, in spite of that agreement, there is still a process that for any identified assets, it still has to go through the court for the due process to be enforced. The agreement, there's also agreement with the United States on repatriation. There's also with Switzerland. In Switzerland, for the period of 10 years, already $723 million have been repatriated. So the editorial is also expressing concern that government should ensure that the war against corruption is fought openly and transparently, in the sense that amounts that have been recovered government should be transparent about it, and their disbursement into economic activities should also be made public, so that people can be convinced that looted funds that have been recovered are not re-looted.
Thank you very much, Bayo. We have 2 salient issues to discuss this morning, so that's what you can take from the papers. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you, as always.
We'll take a short break now. We'll return and start our discussions.
Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1, a delicious combination of rich cocoa and wholesome goodness of milk. Just add hot water to get an instant chocolatey treat. Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1. Just add hot water.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The NTA Television College Jos admission forms for diploma program in film and television production, television engineering technology, broadcast journalism, and degree programs in mass communication, television journalism, and mass communication television production is now on sale. The sale of forms will commence 14th May and run to 13th August 2018 at the cost of 7,500 naira only per form, payable through the remitter platform in favor of NTA Television College Jos. Forms can be obtained from all marketing offices in NTA State Capital Stations, zonal centers, Training Directorate of the NTA Headquarters Abuja, and the Office of the Academic Secretary of the NTA Television College. Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE, SSCE in relevant areas of study, including English and mathematics, in not more than 2 sittings. All completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before the 13th of August 2018 to the stations where the forms were obtained. For further inquiries, please contact the Office of the Academic Secretary on these numbers. Announcer, Registrar.
In case you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria, and now to our first topic of conversation. But before we introduce our guests, we'll take this short report to set the tone for our discussion. Now, only good governance can provide the appropriate framework for meeting the challenge of democracy in the country. This was the submission of the former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Atahiru Jega, in a lecture to mark Democracy Day in Abuja. With the theme, Peace Building and Good Governance for Sustainable Development, Professor Jega said Nigerians must nurture and develop the infrastructure for peace and invest massively in peace building and sustainable development.
Some chairmen of committees in the National Assembly have become notorious on this issue of recklessly with impunity demanding for bribes. I have heard stories from many vice chancellors about the horrors that they go through on questions of budget and so-called oversight. All we are saying is that we must cast the searchlight so that Nigerians, and particularly public office holders, should have basic common decency and integrity in the ways in which they discharge their responsibilities.
President Muhammadu Buhari at the occasion said though Nigeria has experienced rough times, democracy and good governance have helped the country overcome her challenges. The president called on Nigerians to remain steadfast and keep faith with his administrations in its commitment to peace building and delivering the dividends of democracy to Nigerians.
Have reached new heights, and the outcome in respect of investment in infrastructure expansion are manifest everywhere. Overall, we are on track. There can be no progress in any facet of our national life unless we tackle and curb corruption. We will not relent in our efforts to eliminate it regardless of the opposition.
All right, now that's the background for our discussion this morning. We have 2 guests right here with us to elaborate further on the matters arising from the Democracy Day lecture. First, we'd like to welcome Madam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity to the President. Madam Garba, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria again.
Thank you, as always.
All right, and we also have with us here Mike Utsaha. Utsaha is a legal practitioner and civil society activist. Pleasure to have you both on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, now let's keep even from the sound bites that we picked a moment ago and from the reports that we are very lavish in the media yesterday. The focus appeared to have been on the bribe-taking allegation, also, the president's quip about, Orubebe not being present at the lecture, but quite essentially, the lecture dealt with the nexus between peace building and good governance, and then ultimately the impact on sustainable development. So, gentlemen, taking a look at the lecture in totality, plus, of course, the matters arising from the conversation thereon, was it fitting for a Democracy Day celebration?
Oh, very well indeed, because Jega gave this nation, it's like the nation was presented before a physician. First of all, to be diagnosed of her problems and the solutions offered. It's interesting the way journalism works, because the media took off from, the issue of corruption and stayed on it, and Oru Bebe, as we have said. But there are many issues very critical to the well-being of this country now and in the future, which is matters such as, for instance, the peace-building issue itself. This is a country that has excelled globally as a peace builder outside our borders. And we are contending with the challenges internally. And Jega was bringing it to Nigerians. Look, so these things that you're doing outside, why don't you come and do the same on a continuous, basis? And matters of democracy, he excelled all of these things, political parties that would give democracy to the country. They don't offer it to their own members. And, you saw this as a grave danger, to 2019 in particular, and the future of democracy, which he insisted mustn't be taken for granted. Nigerians fought hard, made a lot of sacrifices to put it in place. It's a legacy, achievement. So the challenge to current, politicians and holders of position is, so then what are you doing, to put your own legacies in place? So there's so much that he said that really, will take quite some time to talk about.
Yes, Mike, so many issues were thrown up at that lecture. What are the key points for you?
I think we need to, first of all, look at the antecedents of the gentleman we are talking about this morning. This is a gentleman who has, historically been known to speak truths to power. He was a lecturer in the university, rose up to become ASU president, eventually became one of the frontline actors in the period that saw us to the emergence of democracy in 1999. So he comes to this lecture against the background of someone who has really, really paid his dues as far as democracy is concerned. The highest point being his, leading us from the transition to one government into another in 2015. So, I mean, if I was an active politician, I would take very seriously what Jega has to say. He talks about the deficit of good governance, which is a constitutional imperative. And I think the focus usually when we talk about good governance and all of that is usually on the federal government. But Jega is telling us that the same thing is happening at the states. There is the same expectation on state governors and state legislatures, he stopped short of really going from the peace-building imperative to security, failure in the security apparatus, And these are concerns that are on the minds of practically every Nigerian. Like Malam Garbashe who said, the last few months and years, we have experienced very serious issues of security failure, and it's something that should agitate the minds of every well-meaning Nigerian, especially as we look towards the year 2019.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. Gentlemen, let's examine again the paradoxes that the lecturer, that's Professor Jega, threw up, and as Malam Garba Shehu has indicated. Paradox one, amongst other things, that look, if we are to build our peace, what are the lessons that we ought to learn from our peacekeeping and peace enforcement operations internationally, for which we have also gained renown? And how do we bring those experiences back home? And also for the paradox of parties, lacking generally in internal democracy, and yet they ordinarily should be the platforms to champion democracy. But how all of this will gel together to drive good governance and ultimately sustainable development? What are the areas that we need to focus on arising from the points articulated by Professor Jega?
Well, as an administration, there is a growing understanding of the need for engagement. And I think that, in the president's National Day broadcast, he tried to move,
Democracy
to
Day
Democracy Day broadcast, address some of those elements that Atahiru Jega raised in that lecture. Matters, taking the issue of security beyond law enforcement and engagement, with religious leaders, with the community leaders, and the political leaders, and this thing being a responsibility, not just for the federal government. And I think this is the mistake often made. Assumptions are made that matters of security are federal government and it's not the business of states and local governments. And then everyone has to come into the table, and then they take these things together, especially when, it comes to the issue of intelligence, local monitoring of local situations, a role that in the past, traditional institutions had served very well, monitoring movements in and out of villages and townships and communities, and to make sure that people don't just come in, whatever threats that they had brought in, they just simply accommodated. So I think these are matters that, as for the political parties, and I think that, so the thing then is that they ought to be talking also, because we must make the admission that we haven't seen the best of the political parties managing internal democracy. It's not just to talk about it, so you have to put these things into practice. So let them do it. I think the taste of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. So let's see them do it before, so that they are believed and they were convinced that democracy is safe in their hands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll stick with that issue, Mike, because Professor Jega seemed to be concerned about parties' internal democracy and how they handle things. Seems to be saying that you don't give what you don't have. And he expressed concern about what is going to happen in the next general elections if so much violence was witnessed in Congresses. So what do you say to that?
It's really unfortunate that in view of the important position that political parties occupy in the democratization process, we are seeing the kind of damning assessments that we have seen of political parties over the last few years, including the last party congresses of, unfortunately, the party that is in power. A lot is expected of the APC as a party, a lot is expected of even the other political parties. They are the major building block of democracy, and if like Kingsley said, you cannot give what you don't have. So if you are a party aspiring to leadership at various levels of this country and you do not have internal democratic practices, then you really cannot be offering what you do not have. So this is a wake-up call, I would say. It's a reminder to our elite politicians that, look, this country requires the best, and the best can only come if we put the national interest first, in spite of our political interest and our political affiliations. We need to go back to the drawing board and say that political parties must give what they, must themselves observe what they're offering Nigerians. You cannot say you want to be president, you cannot say you want to be governor or senator of any of the elective offices when within your political party, we cannot say internal democratic practices. And for me, there couldn't have been a better person to voice out this concern than Professor Jega. He has really seen it all. And if he is saying or expressing this kind of concern, I think politicians should really take this very seriously.
All right, Mike, still with you, and the point that Malaga Bashir was elaborated on, and that has to do with the attention that Professor Jega has drawn to, if you like, the abdication of otherwise coterminous duties and responsibilities. For instance, local governments on Good Morning Nigeria, we always call attention to the subnational governments, whether in the management of the economy, but in this case, with regard to good governance and security. What has led to this seeming abdication of the coterminous responsibility, either for peace building or for security? We have some good examples, no doubt about it. Plateau State, for instance, is striving hard with regard to peace building. But how did we get to the stage that everybody says, listen, it's Abuja that will take care of this?
The local government system has, it has collapsed, let's say so. Local governments have become really centers of distributing federal resources, I would say. No single development is taking place at local governments. I mean, I won't sit down here and say that it's the same case in every local government, but for the most part, local governments are not offering the service that we have always known them for. As a kid growing up, we had local governments take responsibility even in the development of infrastructure. That is not happening now. It's not. You know, so I think, again, we'd really need to go back to the drawing board and to say that what exactly do we want as a people? And what are the institutions that we need to be able to, you know, predispose us to these desires that we want or we wish to have as a nation? And the political class plays a critical role in this. But again, like Malam Garba Shehu said, there is a need for engagement. It is not just the professional politicians. We would like to see traditional institutions involved in this process of taking us back to where we were and where we desire to be. We would need religious leaders to also do the same thing, you know. So it's a whole gamut of, you know, institutions, personalities, and all of that.
Sorry to interject. And civil society. Take, for instance, a conversation we've always had on Good Morning Nigeria with regard to the conduct of local government elections. As it turns out, and we have had the experience where there are no caretaker committees in place in the states, whenever a state conducts, that's right,
wins everything.
Wins virtually everything. And then we keep asking, where are the voices of the civil society organizations in these localities?
Again, it's the same thing. Most civil society organizations are interested in what happens at the federal level. To a certain extent, what happens at the state level. Again, so we are also complicit in this total collapse of the local government system. And you are probably right. We need to really go beyond this fetish of the federal government to what happens at the states. You know, the states ought to be doing a lot in terms of delivering good governance in this country. But I'm sorry, that's not happening.
Malam Garba Shehu, let's look at the democracy itself. 19 years. A lot of people didn't seem to give Nigeria any chance, maybe because of our diversity. But here we are, almost 20 years of democracy. How have we fared as a country?
Well, I think the fact that democracy has subsisted, you know, for nearly 2 decades is itself a major achievement. Because why has it failed to evolve, to be in place properly over time? Is because it has always been disrupted, you know, by repeated military interventions in the past. And democracy being a self-correcting process, it evolves and gets better, you know, with time. So therefore, the more years we do practice democracy, you know, the better it gets. Let me also use this opportunity then to say that, you know, that Professor Jega, in addition to all of these things we have highlighted, really rang the bell, drawing attention of the nation to the fact that, look, we are sleepwalking our way into 2019 election, and there are landmines which, if they have not been corrected, will get into trouble. And I think that he had a good opportunity because perhaps he never had the time to look back since he left INEC 2015 to x-ray the problems of election. We were lucky we got away with a number of things. He cited, for instance, the issue of runoff election, which is a constitutional issue. He said, look, we have just 7 days to do, that's what the Constitution says. Now, if you do election, say on a Saturday, the results won't be in maybe until 2 days after. By then, you will have pulled out, demobilized INEC staff and all of that. You cannot remobilize in 7 days. That can lead to a crisis. That has to be changed. And he looked at the electoral law. A number of points he made actually indicating that it clashes with the constitution of the country. And unless we are able to make those changes, we will be tested one day.
And that one day could be very soon, Mike. Yes. And how soon would that be? The electoral law. We recall, again, on the eve of the 2015 election, the National Assembly was trying to amend the 2010 Electoral Act as previously amended itself. Unfortunately, that plan fell through. And here we are, inching towards 2019, and to use Garba Shehu's expression, quoting by Professor Jega, we are sleepwalking into that. Yes. The 2017 or now 2018 Electoral Amendment Act is still in the crucible. There are all kinds of issues. Is this a matter that the National Assembly can wake up to and say, look, these are probably potential landmines that we're going to address at this time?
I completely agree with Malam Garba Shehu on this, and I agree with Professor Jega also. But let me go back to the issue of 19 years of democracy and how this is a landmark event for us as Nigerians. You know, this is the first time that we are having this unbroken chain of democracy. Perfect, imperfect, I mean, it's neither here nor there. The important thing is that we have had 19 years of democratic rule without any break of any kind. I think that's something to celebrate. But beyond the celebrations, beyond rolling out the drums, this is something that every Nigerian has got to hear. Most times you hear comparisons between Nigeria and the UK. In the UK, this is how it's done. In Canada, this is how it's done. In Australia, this is how it's done. In America, this is how. The American Constitution is over 300 years. And we're talking about a mere 19 years. Can you realistically do a comparison between Nigeria and America? I know there are good friends of mine there who really want to slay me that I'm making this position. But it is my position, really, that we cannot realistically do a comparison between Nigeria and the United States of America in terms of experience, in terms of institutions, in terms of the well-meaning nature of the politicians in these countries. So we really need to give ourselves some time and the patience to get to where we really ought to be. In 19 years, I mean, Kingsley, what do you expect of your 19-year-old child? He should, be rounding up his four-year course in the university if there are no strikes and all of that. So what do you expect of a 19-year-old? This really, for me, is what Nigerians should reflect on.
A 19-year-old is still a teenager.
Exactly.
Probably just exiting the teenage
exactly.
years. So yesterday, Professor...
Is it an excuse for irresponsible behavior? Certainly not. It is not an excuse.
That is a key word. Let's get a closing thoughts now, because we have another topic. We're dealing with security in our second topic. Namely, when democracy, some argue, should not be taken for granted. And that's the other leg of the topic that Professor Jega touched on in the Democracy Day lecture, peace building and good governance. Some scholars would argue that, look, good governance is imperative for the sustenance of democracy. Are we right on track on this?
Not exactly. If we were, certainly Jega would not have scored 100% on the lecture. He did. But another issue that I think we ought also not to ignore is the tendency, growing tendency, to speak in hatred in the country, which is yet another major threat. This is coming from not only politicians, but community leaders, religious leaders, and all of this. Yeah, so the government may be doing things, to put things right, especially at the center, as it is at the moment. But the thing is that the society also ought to be ready to move forward. There are things that are caught to democracy, whether individual conduct or the conduct of governments. You mentioned the good governance itself, without which really democracy would not be in all rightfulness be called democracy in practice, and in its own framework. So we've got to change things, and I think that individuals must change, governments must change, otherwise we can't get it right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. And also joined us to discuss that issue is Michael Saha, is a legal practitioner and a member of the civil society. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We will be taking a short break now, and we'll go into our next topic of discussion.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerula. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Your perfect family is under threat by germs. Infectious diseases are now the world's biggest killer of adults and children. Every day, 16,000 children under the ages of 5 and thousands of adults die from infectious diseases. These infectious diseases are caused by germs. They are everywhere. An average human being comes in contact with over 1 million germs daily. In unclean water, dirty surfaces, in the toilet, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes. Germs can cause deadly diseases like typhoid, diarrhea, flu, and cough. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 Cap Full for surface cleaning in your bathing water, in your laundry water, for first aid, to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol Sure. Endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three put
You are welcome, sir.
as usual, yeah?
You take that one. You take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have. You don't have.
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobo to come to chocolate rice of made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
And how they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, for our second topic of conversation today, which has to do with the gains of the fight against insurgency and other security challenges. We already have our guests seated, but before we introduce them, let's take this background report by our correspondent, Victor Azu.
When President Muhammadu Buhari was sworn in 2015, he promptly declared that public safety and security will be one of the cardinal objectives of his administration. Before the Buhari administration came into being 3 years ago, the Boko Haram insurgents had several local government areas in the northeast under their control. The government swung into action, providing more sophisticated equipment for the military and other security agencies, while bringing in the required political will to reinvigorate the fight against insurgency.
Today, the capacity of the insurgents has been degraded, leading to the re-establishment of authority of government in the previously captured areas and the release of captives, including 106 Chibok and 104 Dapchi schoolgirls and about 16,000 other persons held by Boko Haram. The government in the last 3 years has also secured IDP camps while improving the mechanism for the distribution of basic aid, food, and essential commodities, using various strategies in collaboration with local and international organizations in order to cushion the effect of the insurgency on internally displaced persons. The last 3 years of the Buhari administration has overseen other gains of the fight against insurgency, which guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be telling us shortly.
Us now to do justice to our discussion on the 3 years of fighting insurgency, the gains we have made so far. Major General Ibrahim Attahiru is the Deputy Chief of Policy and Plans of the Nigerian Army. Also joining us is Rear Admiral Henry Babalola. He is the Chief of Policy and Plans, Naval Headquarters. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. All right, there are two other guests who are here with us in the studios. First, I would like to also introduce Air Vice Marshal Ola Tokunbo Adesonya. He's Director of Public Relations and Information of the Nigerian Air Force. AVM Adesonya, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, a security analyst and expert, Kabir Adamon. Kabir, pleasure to have you back again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Pleasure is mine.
Yeah, all right. Well, gentlemen, let's begin this conversation. First by hearing from the brass hats, military brass hats, who are here with us in the studios. 3 years on, with the renewed vigor in dealing with insurgency and emergent security challenges, what has been the experience? Let's begin with the Vice Admiral.
I believe
Rear
that.
Admiral, rather.
Thank you very much. I believe that we've made tremendous gains the last 3 years with Nigerians, and we are witnesses to what was happening 3 years ago and now. And I think the military has done tremendously well. And we can attest to this by a lot of indices. One, life has returned to most of these communities, and the insecurity that was extremely prevalent about 3 years ago has improved tremendously. And we'll do this great thanks to the cooperation and the renewed vigor of government to reposition security agencies, especially elements of the Nigerian Army, because the crisis in the Northeast area is mainly land-centric, and the Army has been very, very tremendous with a lot of support from the Air Force. And so what we have is that a lot of territories have been liberated, law and order has been restored in most of the communities. And if we look very well, we know that I think we have made a lot of progress in the last 3 years.
Major General Attahiru, you tell us about the experience of the ground troops. He has given us from the point of view of the Navy.
Thank you. Currently in the Northeast, what we have is that the fight against terrorism and insurgency has been ongoing. We have set decisive conditions for the final dismantling of the Boko Haram insurgency. This, I can tell you, just a few months back, we were able to rout the Boko Haram from Camp Zero, and similar Operation Last Hold, for instance. In the next couple of days, Operation Last Hold will be launched. It is meant to clear the whole of northern Borno of all the insurgents. Then there will be a link-up point to the center and then towards Maiduguri for the final clearance. And with that, it is believed Boko Haram will come to a final end. Aside from that, on the LCBC countries, Lake Chad Basin countries, we've been having cooperation with Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and indeed Benin Republic, where we've been having cooperation across borders to ensure the routing of Boko Haram as well.
Okay, Okay, Evie Adesanya, your experience from the air, the experience of this fight against insurgency. Let's have your experience.
Thank you once again. Taking a cue from what Rear Admiral Babalola said, we know that what obtained in the past 3 years is not what obtains now. And you find that the air operations being conducted by the Nigerian Air Force, say about 2 years ago, were mostly close air support operations in support of the land forces to create the enabling environment for our land forces to be able to operate. These days, we find that more of our operations are either intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, which are aimed at gathering intelligence, which we either make use of pass to the land forces. And then we also find that more often than not, we are able to conduct what we call air interdiction missions, which are basically aimed at killing the birds while they are still in their nest. And an example of that would be the Operation Thunder Strike that was concluded about 2 weeks ago. And that was particularly targeted at known Boko Haram terrorist locations, which have become relatively inaccessible due to the onset of the rainy season. And that operation proved quite successful. And because of the enabling environment we have now, the Nigerian Air Force is able to also conduct a lot of humanitarian outreach programs in the Northeast, which in the past could not really be conducted.
Well, Evie Adesanya, I would like you to speak some more on the role of the Nigerian Air Force, because before 3 years, before 2015, very little was heard about air operations in terms of either support or reconnaissance or interdiction. What has changed? Acquisition of new platforms, or what has changed in terms of the participation of the Air Force in the fight against insurgents in the Northeast?
Yeah, okay, let me start by saying that the Nigerian Air Force has, of course, been in the thick of action right from the onset of the campaign against insurgency, although I must admit that maybe not much was being made known to the public of the activities of the Nigerian Air Force until more recently. But basically, the Nigerian Air Force has been involved in what I call close air support operations. An example which I could easily cite would be the capture of Dikwa in 2015, where what happened was that we had our ATR-42 Maritime Patrol Aircraft, which is an ISR platform. It was able to detect the fact that the Boko Haram terrorists were laying ambush, and of course this information was relayed to our land forces, and we took out the Nigerian Air Force took out those terrorists, and the Nigerian Army was able to move in and then did the necessary clearance operations, which led to the capture of Dikwa. And aside from such close air support missions, we also had what we call logistics resupply missions. These are aimed at supplying necessary munitions, food, fuel, and the rest to various remote locations of various forces. And this is quite important when we know that going by road could, of course, be a bit tardy and could also be time-consuming. And aside from this one, I mentioned the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. Intelligence is critical in any warfare, and particularly in asymmetric warfare of this nation. So the Nigerian Air Force, with its ISR platforms, has been doing a lot of gathering intelligence, which it had been making use of sometimes, and on other occasions passing to the land forces. I must mention that the Nigerian Air Force also has what we call the special forces, which fight side by side with the land forces in the Sambisa Forest and other theaters of operation.
All right, just before we bring in Kabir, let's listen again to Rear Admiral. Rear Admiral, well, one of the issues with regard to fighting Boko Haram had to do with the operations in the Lake Chad area. Of course, if you didn't have an amphibious deployment, that was going to be challenging, even though Lake Chad is said to have shrunk considerably. What has changed with regard to deployments, the amphibious battalion, amphibious brigade, or amphibious platforms to deal with some of those pockets of hamlets where Boko Haram members were either gathering or operating from?
Thank you very much. Following the presidential directive in 2016, the Nigerian Navy was given a directive to emplaced a naval base in the Lake Chad. And so basically we located to Baga at the fish dam. And we have elements of the Navy there as a full-fledged naval base there now. And the job of the mandate of the base is actually to prevent river crossings from the numerous lakes and the islands you have on the Lake Chad itself, because we discovered that they had become safe havens for Boko Haram elements and others. And that's why we are mobilized there. We have our patrol boats, a full-fledged naval base there to give support to the land forces. And then we have also been involved too in some other special operations around the area. And added to this is the fact that the Nigerian Navy too has an element of the Armed Forces Special Forces Battalion that we work in. We also have our special boat service personnel. And I think this has improved security tremendously. Before the advent of Boko Haram, to surprise Nigerians to hear that the bulk of the dry fish and others we get in Nigeria are actually from the Lake Chad Basin and others. And it was really giving a boost to the economy. But when the crisis started, that collapsed and everything. So what we are doing now is to build confidence, to assure people, and to give close support to the Army and the Air Force elements so that law and order will be restored in the area. I think that
you are a security expert. What's your view on Nigeria's fight against insurgency, especially the push in the last 3 years?
It's been amazing. The role that the military has played can only be commended. The other aspects that I would say we need to look into and see how to improve is the role of the other security civilian departments. In normal warfare, you take, you hold, and you build. Now, the military, as has been explained here, have taken. Who is doing the holding and who is doing the building? The military is virtually doing all of this in the Northeast. So I would want to see going forward, especially the Office of the National Security Advisor that's coordinating the national counter-terrorism strategy, the involvement of the other security departments in especially these two aspects of holding and rebuilding. You can only ask the military to do so much. The second component that I would like to see going forward in terms of an improvement from the 3 years, how do we win the hearts and minds of the people in the localities where this warfare is ongoing? Several times you hear reports by especially the civil society organizations. The most recent one was by Amnesty International, making some ridiculous allegations. So I think we need to look into that so that at the end of the day, the hearts and minds of the people in the location are won.
All right, Kabir, thanks a lot. Of course, we'll come back to WAM, which is winning hearts and minds, to drill down on that. But I would like, the officers here to speak to something. Yes, you say that you have made tremendous gains, and these gains are also obvious to those, who are either were in the theater of operations or who are also removed from the theater of operations. But tell us something, beginning with General Ibrahim Atahiru. What has been the role of motivation in all that in all the gains that you have recorded, and in particular also, how much public support and appreciation have you received?
I think the whole thing will start with the compelling narrative, strategic compelling narrative we had from Mr. President. The government of the day has 3 cardinal points: security, fighting corruption, and indeed economic development. On the security perspective, this went down with all the security forces and indeed members of the armed forces. This was able to galvanize us into action. And we do not see counterterrorism from law and order aspect alone, also from the socioeconomic and political point of view. When we got on the ground, we ensured the opening of roads, we ensured provision of humanitarian relief to virtually all the communities that were liberated. We ensured NGOs and UN agencies had leeway to get to some of these communities that are in very far-flung areas to provide such relief. And then on the Baga side, like Rear Admiral Babalola has earlier mentioned, we ensured the return of the fishermen we ensured the return of people who do grazing for the sole purposes of ensuring they sell their cattle, and indeed farming communities were encouraged to go back. Right now, as part of the community development effort of the federal government, we're also ensuring certain communities, IDPs, will start going back to those communities. That is the only way people can go back and resettle. All this we're doing within the ambit of winning the hearts and minds of the people of the Northeast.
Well, no, I'm sorry. You know, General Atahiro, before I bring in your other colleagues from the services, with regard to motivation and public support and appreciation, let me give a little background so that you can factor that into your response. At some point, and Kabiru Adamo will recall this, I think it must have been 2010 or 2011, just when, you know, the military were taking on the Boko Haram elements who were common within Maiduguri metropolis, the people themselves started complaining about the operations of the military. And they said, listen, we needed them to be out of our environment. So what has changed?
Well, so many things have changed. One thing you must understand, that the Nigerian army fights a population-centric counter-insurgency effort in the entire Northeast. In other words, people are first and foremost our consideration before we go to hit the insurgents. What we do is, when we go out for operation, we'll try to clear areas of the population before we can carry out proper counter-insurgency operation against the insurgents. So by so doing, by and large, people get sucked into insurgency, whether they like it or not, because the insurgents will prefer to stay within the population to cause mayhem. So we've been talking to the community leaders, leaders of thought in the entire Northeast, making them understand that our effort is actually to come and ensure the total liberation of the people in the Northeast and set standards for the quick return of peace.
I'm going to stay with motivation, and part of motivation is having the right equipment to work with. There have been complaints in the past that some of our military did not have the firepower to confront the insurgents, but the narrative is changing now, with some countries that were hitherto not selling equipment to Nigeria now selling. What has been your experience in the Air Force?
I must say that the level of support received by the Nigerian Air Force from the federal government administration in the past 3 years has been unprecedented. Let me state clearly, for example, that in the past 3 years, the Nigerian Air Force has been able to take delivery of 18 brand new aircraft. And that's no mean feat. We've got 10 Super Mushak trainer aircraft. We've got 4 Mi-35M combat helicopter gunships, and I must add that the Mi-35M is the most sophisticated in that series of Mi helicopters. And then we've also got 2 Diamond aircraft, trainer aircraft, as well as 2 Bell 412 helicopters. In addition to these 8 new aircraft, 12 aircraft that were hitherto grounded have been reactivated. And as we speak, work is still ongoing on the reactivation of more aircraft, like the C-130, the L-39, the EC-135 helicopters. And it's also gratifying to note that the federal government recently paid for 12 Super Tucano aircraft, which is a multi-role aircraft that has capability for day and night operations. And in 2019, Nigerian Air Force will also be expecting the Agusta 109 Power helicopter. I must say that when we consider this, I think the last time the Nigerian Air Force was able to take on board this number of brand new aircraft will be somewhere in the 80s. And of course, when any soldier gets the right equipment to fight, the motivation is there. And in terms of public support and the rest, one of the things the Nigerian Air Force holds there is the fact that the members of the civil populace, especially those in those conflict areas, must be seen to be Nigerians. And the experience has shown that there are actually many of them who actually did not even know the concept of the nation called Nigeria until the advent of things like the medical outreach programs that the services have been conducting. I recollect being in Maiduguri and seeing some IDPs who were airlifted by Nigerian Air Force aircraft from those rural communities and brought to Maiduguri for surgeries. And when I saw them, it was obvious that they were in a strange environment. And the experience afterwards has shown that they now have more belief in the system, in that entity called Nigeria. And they've been cooperating with the armed forces and with Nigerian Air Force in that regard.
All right, AVM, thank you very much. Rear Admiral Babalola, let's bring you in as well. In terms of motivation, public support, and appreciation. What has been the naval experience?
I think the public support, that is one vital thing you need when you are confronted with situations that we are facing now. We cannot fight in isolation of the local populace. From the Nigerian Navy perspective, like I stated earlier on, we are mandated to restore peace to the Lake Chad Basin area and to the entire fishing community in Baga and others. And then when we were introduced to the area, the first thing we did was to try to win hearts and minds of the populace by other programs, just like AVM Tokumo Salisoya said. We dialogue with them consistently, almost on a daily basis, and we offer them a lot of support. That, for instance, the naval-based Lake Chad, we know that they have challenges of water and others. We give water there. We do medical outreach programs and others. And all of these are with a view to winning hearts and minds. It's not been very easy because there's been this culture of not allowing them to talk because of the consequences of the local populace cooperating with security agencies. But all of this, I think gradually we're breaking that barrier, and I think there have been a lot of success. In the area of motivating our personnel we discovered that this our personnel must be rotated constantly because they stay too long in a problem. And we also have very special welfare incentives for them. So at the end, we have been able to establish a regime that means that going to serve in the North is not actually a punishment or something. And as we speak, we have personnel, I want to use the word lobby, quote and unquote, to go to the Northeast because they know the consequences.
Who are enthusiastic to be closer to the Northeast. All right, well, gentlemen, we'll have some reactions that have come in by way of tweets. Our Twitter handle is there on the screen. You can see it at NTA GMA. We are taking those tweets right away. Mike Ayankwo has this tweet. The present government has really tried in this regard. That's with respect to dealing with insecurity. But a lot still has to be done to stamp out insurgency in its entirety. Now, we want relative peace in the whole country. It's not the duty of government alone, but all of us.
And Dele Jack Solomon says, as we say thank you to the Nigerian military and other paramilitary organizations involved in the fight against all forms of insecurity in Nigeria in the past 3 years, we implore PMB's administration and the affected state governments to work together, taking immediate steps to shore up security for herders and farmers, strengthening conflict resolution mechanism, continue to decimate and counter the Boko Haram terrorist attacks, address negative environmental trends, and curb cross-border movements of both cattle rustlers and armed herders.
This is Victor Hioswama tweeting. It says the first major achievement of this government, that's Buhari administration, was the fight against insurgency. And it's obvious that Boko Haram has been seriously degraded. The new security threat now is the herdsmen and farmers conflict. It must be tackled.
Aminu Haliru actually says the current administration has achieved tremendously well in fighting insurgency in the northeast by degrading almost the entire Boko Haram. So kudos to our military and other security agencies. However, government needs to address the welfare of our security personnel in order to encourage them to do more in securing our country.
Amabwala Hombabs tweets, now the fight against insurgency has been more than efficacious. However, more needs to be done in eliminating the vampires with their roots. We may not have many local governments occupied by them, but the truth remains that they are still active in a couple of local government areas. Unfortunately, as many of the Nigerian Army and other service and security agencies lay down their lives to secure us, they've not had the expected accolades. Nigerians must appreciate the military boys. Time was when Abuja was under siege, but today we can only say thank you to them. Boko Haram is degraded, but it's not impossible that some of its members may have morphed into killer headsmen.
for Festus Akimboyewa that all the local governments controlled by Boko Haram have been liberated and thousands of hostages rescued, there's no doubt that government has made good progress in the fight against insurgency. But despite these gains, sustained effort is needed in the fight against Boko Haram.
All right, this is from Bala Mohammed Gaidam. It says the fight against insurgency is a huge success, especially in the northeast, as we now go to marketplaces, mosques, and also sleep comfortably in our homes. Kudos to President Muhammadu Buhari administration.
And Habila Kwara Zakshi says, sincerely, the fight against insurgency has recorded some level of appreciable success in the past 3 years. The only burning security threat to the nation that needs urgent attention now is the herdsmen killings.
Shakiro tweets, now the evidence is there. Insurgency in 2014 and 2018. Boko Haram has been degraded. If a leader is determined to achieve a goal and is in the process, then there must be aspects of disappointment. But a courageous leader goes on with his determination.
And the last tweet here for now, Sani Michael Omakoji, he says, we appreciate what the Nigerian army is doing to curb the insurgency, but the casualty recorded in Fulani herdsmen crisis is absolutely mind-boggling and disturbing. We appeal if you can be more proactive.
All right, those are the tweets that we have in the meantime on this subject matter. Just before we move into other areas of security challenges, Kabir Adamu, earlier you were talking about winning hearts and minds. First you hold and then you build. What do we need to do with regard to the Northeast? As you were talking earlier about interagency cooperation, why are we seeing this lag between the successes recorded, shall we say, by the ballistic forces and then those who are supposed to assist with building who appear to be lagging behind? What is required to be done?
Well, from my viewpoint, it appears there is an overemphasis on the military component of the counter-terrorism strategy. Recently, the President launched the policy framework and National Action Plan on countering and prevention of violent extremism. It spelled out in clear terms the various components of CV, that's countering violent extremism, roles that will be played by the civilian departments. Unfortunately, what we've witnessed, it has stayed at the federal level. We haven't seen it cascade down to the state and the local government levels. So I would want to say it's a problem first of policy and then one of implementation. Perhaps going forward, especially in the coming years, would want to see more of the involvement of especially the grassroots in this aspect. Funding is another major issue. Of course, there is a scarcity of funds, and so most of it goes to the military aspect of the counter-insurgency operations. Perhaps that's another area that especially the National Assembly needs to look closely at and see how funding for these other components of the counter-terrorism strategy can be looked at. I know that the police in particular indicated that Burma would be a case study. They had hoped to deploy massively in Burma and then allow the military to carry on with what they are doing. But we're not seeing that, unfortunately. Perhaps they would give us an explanation on why that didn't happen, but nothing tells us in terms of what is on ground right now, why they haven't deployed to Burma to take control of security within the city.
Maybe Major General Tahiru will just pick up from there. I was going to also add that he placed emphasis, he made a point that there seems to be a lot of emphasis on the military aspect of fighting insurgency. So you can speak to those 2 points.
Thank you very much. I cannot agree less with Adamu's assertion. The entire process of counterinsurgency should be a whole of government approach. In other words, all ministries, departments, and agencies in government should have specific roles outlined for them. The military line of effort appears to be the one that is most orchestrated. And this, I think, has to go with possibly lack of understanding of their function, that is the MDAs, in what they should do in a war effort. Oftentimes, people even see it as a contest between Nigerian army or possibly the Nigerian armed forces and Boko Haram. They don't see it that the whole nation is at war. When a nation is at war, you need to orchestrate elements of national power to be able to defeat such a war. And that is what is lacking in this case. But with time, people have been educated, and I believe like he just said, the policy is in place now, and with time, people will be so made, MDAs will be made to execute whatever they are supposed to. For instance, Justice Ministry, we have a whole lot of people who are supposed to be carried before the judiciary. Up till now, they are still waiting for that. We have holding centers for these detainees. There are delays in that. Government, just not too long ago, sent a task force which is doing that. So many people in Kainji and in Maiduguri have been taken before the law courts so that they can go through that. Alternative dispute resolution is another way of also ensuring this is addressed. So I'm sure once the MDAs have a total understanding of what is expected of them, we'll have all the line of effort being orchestrated, because for now it's only the military line of effort and the humanitarian action line of effort that we see more of in the theater of war. Thank you.
I just still with you, General Atahiru, and of course your other colleagues, on the basis of their own experience, may wish to also make a comment on this. Yes, the operations in the Northeast have been successful. Law and order has been restored in most parts, as you have indicated. The Boko Haram elements have been cleared out. But one issue that we got to know about over the years has been the fact that Boko Haram terrorists also laid mines, landmines, in most parts of where they held territory. Of course, this was to act as a buffer for them. How much attention is being paid to demining? Because that can be very critical in terms of people returning to normal agricultural life. Otherwise, we saw the experience in Mozambique with the Renamo rebels. We also saw that with UNITA in Angola.
Well, basically for demining, the Nigerian Army engineers has been conducting the mining around the areas where these reports come to us while in the theater of operation. And indeed, the United Nations is also partnering with us going forward to ensure certain areas where people intend going back to, especially IDPs and those who intend farming, we also go out there to carry out the mining action. But I think the major problem has been that of IED over and above mine warfare as it is. And for that, we've been carrying out counter-network operations. We ensure precursor materials do not get to the people who are actually going to put these things together into IEDs. We've been doing operations aimed at ensuring we target those ones who are the makers of these IEDs. Those are the processes that have been in place.
Rear Admiral Babalola, let's now go to other. When we hear of insurgency, what comes to mind mostly, especially in Nigeria, is the Boko Haram fight and other. But there are so many others that we have to contend with. One of the cankerworms coming up now, ongoing on now, is the herder farmer clash. What other ones do you have, as the Navy, have to deal with?
Thank you. In the maritime environment, which I think is a critical factor to this, because the over 90% of our imports and exports are done via the waterways and others. And then when we have very lawful users of the seas, we also have the criminal elements. They want to profit from this through illegal trafficking in arms, ammunition, and everything. And then we have sustained patrols to an extent to ensure that that aspect, that area, that very critical area, is made very safe for genuine users of the sea. Then we've also have to deal with the backwaters. The backwaters, I mean that we believe that crimes, even at sea, they emanate from land and others. And then we'll be able to do this with support of government. And I think in the last 3 years, we're going to have river patrol boats, 200 penal boats, and boats from Sia in France and other areas. And the idea is to tackle the menace on land before it gets to. And in doing that, too, we have engaged very actively the local populace, traditional rulers, opinion groups, and other pressure groups in the Niger Delta, as to actually sustain the fight against insurgency, terrorism, and herders and farmers' clashes and everything. We need the support of government. We have this abundantly. We now transfer this to galvanizing the personnel to actually engage these people. And we are also not unmindful of the fact that, fine, insurgency operations, we are fighting or we are confronting Nigerians, our own citizens. So that, again, has created a situation whereby we need to be more careful. We are more proactive so that we don't suck in other innocent Nigerians. But by and large, I believe that tremendous gains have been made, and we hope to sustain this with other operations.
But I would like you to speak some more to the blue economy and the impact thereon by issues that you touched on briefly: piracy, illegal oil bunkering, for instance, and all kinds of criminal activities. Now, we know that the Senate, about a couple of weeks ago, met with, of course, the top brass of the military, and one of the issues that came out of that meeting, as reported, had to do with the fact that there was an appreciation now of the need, for further expenditure by way of platforms and so on and so forth. There's always been the complaint, for instance, that the Navy do not appear to have sufficient equipment, to man Nigeria's extensive coastline, where you have, pirates, and all kinds of illegal bunkers. But what successes have we achieved, and what more requires to be done?
Thank you very much, sir. Nigeria's maritime environment is very vast, 84,000 square nautical miles. That is one-third this landmass of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And you cannot have total sea control, even with powerful navies of the world. What we'll do is that we have identified some areas that we have a strong prevalence of most of these acts. I'll give an example, like approaches to Bonny, Escravos, and the Lagos Harbor in itself. So what we do is that we have invested heavily in having patrol boats. We have an operation that is ongoing, about 3 years old. That's the operation Sarin Teku. And what we do is that we just amass some fleets of ships, and we have capital ships right on ground there, and we have other ships patrolling around these troubled areas. And then we have been doing this to look at, we'll go into the idea is that if we don't have secure sea lanes of communication, it's going to impact very, very negatively on the economy. Like I said, the Nigeria's economy is sea-based, and in the last 20 years, there have been other investments offshore, like the Bonga, the Agbami, the EA fields, and everything. And once there's a disruption in any of the activities of these places, it's going to have very, very tremendous effect on the economy. And what we seek to achieve is that, fine, we cannot have total sea control, but we have identified critical areas, and then we have upped our ante in these particular areas. And we're also doing that too in conjunction with the other services, Nigerian Army, the Air Force. The Nigerian Air Force Maritime Patrol aircraft have been of tremendous assistance to us in this regard, because they go on patrols, they feed us with reports, and they tell us where to go. And lastly, we believe that the Nigerian Navy, so for instance, a particular patrol ship, that is a Pabana, we have about 830,000 liters of automotive gas oil for 1 week of patrols. So we believe that this is expensive, so we are investing in technology. We have a Fakonai project and some other listening things, so that at any time we don't do what I could term aimless patrols of the past. We get intelligence and information, and we assign vessels to the place. I think there has been a lot of improvement from about 2015, when when our oil outputs actually went down due to agitations. So in doing all of this, we are talking to the to opinion leaders, to militants and other pressure groups in the area, and I think that has transformed to what we are witnessing now.
Even Madison, let's talk about some of the other security issues you have to contend with. So he mentioned that you give them some support for air surveillance and all this. So let's talk about the other security issues.
In particular, I mean, some of the concerns that have been expressed have to do with the fact that, all right, so besides the Northeast, elsewhere in the country, Zamfara, for instance, Kaduna, Benue, and other places where you're having frequent farmers and herdsmen clashes and just plain banditry. the Air Force do not, or doesn't appear to have its wings over these areas. Is that the correct position?
I wouldn't say the Nigerian Air Force doesn't appear to have its wing over those areas. You know, one of the characteristics of air power is its versatility. You can have an air base in Kano, but that will have its eyes on areas over the entire north-west zone of the country. But beyond that, the Nigerian Air Force also has increasingly taken steps to also bring security closer to the people and in line with the directives of the president. And one of these things is the establishment of what we call the quick response units. An example will be in Zamfara, where you mentioned. The Nigerian Air Force recently established a quick response group in Zamfara. Similarly, quick response wings were established in, at Ngoroje in Taraba State, at Agatu in Benue, and Doma in Nasarawa. And the good thing is that these units have been populated with special forces, and the whole idea is to complement the already existing security arrangements in those places. And it must be stated that also within the past 3 years, something that has been unprecedented is the fact that the Nigerian Air Force has been able to recruit well over 7,000 individuals in realization of the need that these various new units will need to be manned. And in order to achieve that, our military training center, the facilities there had to be tremendously improved upon, and that was done.
Thank you, Evian. I will briefly just touch on an issue with General Atahiru, and that's the issue of the remaining Chibok girls and Leah Sharibu. A lot of Nigerians are concerned. I, as a mother, am concerned as well. Are we ever going to have them back, and how soon are we having them back?
Well, I think we must remain very optimistic. We're going to have them back, that I can assure you. There are a whole lot of non-kinetic operations that are ongoing. Government is also making tremendous effort to ensure not just Leah Sharibu and indeed the other Chibok girls. Very soon they should be joining their family. I'm very optimistic about that.
That's very good news.
Yes.
All right. Just before we take our tweets, Kabiru, let's get this from you. With regard to dealing with other security challenges beyond the Northeast, are we deploying fast enough? Are we responding adequately?
Well, I'm very happy with the comment from the Air Force regarding the establishment of quick response unit. One of the things that, from my viewpoint as an observer, is the absence of communication and then rapid response in security challenges. A good example is the incident that happened in Broadening on May 13th, if I remember well, when bandits blocked the highway and operated for about 2 hours, and there didn't seem to be any response. So hopefully going forward with the establishment of this quick response units, that type of a situation would not repeat itself. I mentioned communication, both between the military and the civil security departments, as well as with residents of those locations. So we need to provide readily accessible and reachable numbers that residents can immediately communicate with both the military and other civil security departments so that they can now deploy quickly. The critical component there, which unfortunately is not in the hands of the military, is our criminal justice system, its ability to arrest as well as prosecute offenders. Unfortunately, we haven't seen enough of that. It's been mentioned in the course of our conversation. It's also affecting the other security challenges, especially this malicious narrative, the so-called Hada farmer or Fulani herdsmen. So many narrative around that. Also very important is our border enhancement capabilities. What type of measures are both the customs and immigration using to ensure that there is no cross of the border by elements that
Thank you very much, Kabir. We just hope, wish we had more time to discuss it. This is a very wide issue. We have some tweets in now that we have to take. Chief Ozoekwe says the fight against insurgency has been successful to an extent, but much more success and progress would be recorded geometrically if the welfare of the soldiers on the front line is upgraded.
This is from a handle called the Duke of Wuse. I just want to use the opportunity to thank the Nigerian military for all their efforts made to protect the country. God bless the military.
And lastly, Uze Zimokedi says, as long as we fail to unite the spirit of the Nigerian people to believe through actions and absolute commitment that the country is for their dignity, respect, advantages and fairness, there will always exist high risks of violent agitation.
All right, those are the tweets that we can take. And on that note, we'd like to appreciate our 4 guests here in the studios. Kabiru Adamu, the security analyst, always with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks a lot for being around today and for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
We also would like to appreciate Major General Ibrahim Atahiru, who is Deputy Chief of Policy and Plans, excuse me, of the Nigerian Army. General Atahiru, thanks a lot for being on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Our thanks also to AVM Olatokunbo Adesonya, Director of Public Relations and Information, Nigerian Air Force. Thanks for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And lastly, but not the least, coming at the rear Admiral Henry Babalola, Chief of Policy and Plans, Naval Headquarters. Thanks a lot for being with us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so that does it for us at our second topic for conversation this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Let's go very quickly to our sports desk. And there is a story on the Super Eagles who have left Nigeria for London ahead of a pre-World Cup friendly with England. Plus, of course, the Clay Cup season, Roland Garros, Serena Williams back. Straight sets.
The Super Eagles of Nigeria will depart the shores of the country on Wednesday aboard